Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. I wish I could scrub the memory from my brain, bleach it away like a stain on a favorite shirt. But it's there, lodged in the deepest recesses of my mind, a grotesque, throbbing reminder of the day Tinder nearly ruined everything. It started, as most of these things do, with a swipe. I was in a rut, a beige-colored, soul-crushing rut. My job was dull, my social life was non-existent, and the highlight of my week was ordering takeout and binge-watching true crime documentaries. I needed a spark, a jolt of something, anything, to break the monotony. So, like a moth to a flickering flame, I re-downloaded Tinder. I know. Tinder. It's the dating app equivalent of a gas station bathroom. You know you probably shouldn't, but sometimes you're just desperate. I'd had my fair share of cringeworthy dates and awkward encounters, but I clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, the next swipe would lead to something different. His profile was unassuming. A couple of photos of him hiking, one with a dog, and a bio that read, "Looking for someone to explore the city with." His name was Alex, and he seemed normal. Refreshingly normal, actually, compared to the parade of gym selfies and shirtless bathroom pics I'd been subjected to. We matched, exchanged a few messages, and before I knew it, we were planning a date. He suggested a new restaurant downtown, a place that supposedly had the best pizza in the city. I was cautiously optimistic. He seemed genuine, easy to talk to, and well, not terrifying. That was a win in itself. The day of the date, I spent an embarrassing amount of time agonizing over what to wear. Not because I was particularly invested in this guy, but because I was tired of feeling like a slob. I settled on a simple black dress and some comfortable boots, hoping to strike the right balance between effortless and I actually put some thought into this. The restaurant was packed, noisy, and exactly as trendy as I expected. Alex was already there when I arrived, standing near the entrance, scanning the crowd. He looked just like his pictures, maybe even a little better. He had kind eyes, a warm smile, and an easygoing demeanor that immediately put me at ease. We ordered a pizza, some drinks, and started talking. He asked about my job, my hobbies, my family. I asked him about his travels, his passion for photography, his ridiculously adorable dog. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and for the first time in a long time, I felt present, engaged, like I was actually connecting with another human being. As the evening progressed, I started to let my guard down. I shared some personal stories, some vulnerabilities, things I usually kept hidden beneath layers of sarcasm and self-deprecation. He listened intently, offering thoughtful responses and genuine empathy. I was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, I had stumbled upon something special. After dinner, he suggested we take a walk through the park. The night was cool, the air crisp, and the city lights twinkled in the distance. We strolled along the paths, hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. It felt right. That's when things started to unravel. We passed a group of teenagers huddled around a bench, laughing and talking loudly. As we walked by, one of them pointed at Alex and shouted something. I didn't catch the exact words, but it sounded like an accusation, a slur. Alex froze. His face paled, and his grip on my hand tightened. He quickly pulled me away, muttering something about stupid kids and ignorant people. I was taken aback, but I didn't think much of it. Teenagers are often obnoxious, and I assumed it was just some random, meaningless insult. But then it happened again. A few minutes later, we passed a couple walking their dog. As they got closer, the woman stopped, stared at Alex, and whispered something to her partner. He glared at Alex, then steered his dog in the opposite direction. This time, I noticed a flicker of something in Alex's eyes. Fear. Shame. I couldn't quite decipher it, but it was definitely there. I started to feel uneasy. What was going on? I decided to ask, "Alex, is everything okay? Did you do something to offend someone?" He hesitated, then forced a smile. "Of course not. Don't worry about it. Some people are just weird." But his explanation didn't ring true. The incidents kept happening, each one more unsettling than the last. People would stare, whisper, point, sometimes even shout insults. Alex grew increasingly agitated, his cheerful demeanor replaced by a nervous, frantic energy. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I stopped walking and faced him. Alex, tell me the truth. What's going on? Why are people acting like this? He looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. He paced back and forth, running a hand through his hair. It's complicated, he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. Complicated how? I pressed. He took a deep breath, then blurted out. I used to be someone else. I frowned. What do you mean? I changed my name, my appearance, everything. I had to. I was running away from something. My mind raced. Running away from what? The police? A past relationship? A criminal record? The possibilities were endless, and none of them were good. Running away from what, Alex? I asked, my voice trembling. He looked down at his feet, shame etched across his face. I don't want to tell you, he said. You wouldn't understand. Try me, I challenged. He hesitated for a moment, then began to speak. His voice was low, halting, as he recounted a story that sounded like something ripped from the pages of a tabloid newspaper. He had been involved in a scandal, a messy, public scandal that had made national headlines. It involved fraud, embezzlement, and a whole lot of broken promises. He had been vilified in the media, ostracized by his community, and forced to flee his old life to escape the consequences of his actions. He had changed his name, moved to a new city, and tried to start over. He had hoped to bury his past, to reinvent himself as someone new. But it was clear that his past had caught up with him. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say, what to think. I had been so drawn to his apparent normalcy, his kindness, his genuine interest in me. But now, I was faced with the reality that he was a fugitive, a man with a dark and complicated past. Why didn't you tell me this before? I asked, my voice laced with anger and disappointment. I was afraid, he said. I was afraid you wouldn't want anything to do with me if you knew the truth. He was right. I didn't want anything to do with him. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the park, his secret exposed, his carefully constructed facade shattered. I went home, took a long, hot shower, and tried to wash away the feeling of being duped. I deleted his number, blocked him on social media, and vowed to never use Tinder again. But the memory of that night still haunts me. The feeling of betrayal, the realization that I had almost fallen for a con man, the chilling awareness of how easily I could have been drawn into his web of lies. I wish I could forget what happened that day, but I can't. I'm still messed up from it. I swear, I haven't even opened Tinder since. It's been, like, 8 months, and the app is still sitting there on my phone, mocking me. Like a digital tombstone for my shattered faith in humanity, or at least in the guys on Tinder. I wasn't even looking for anything serious, just some casual dating, maybe a distraction from a boring job and the monotony of my routine. I had your typical profile, a few decent pictures, filtered obviously, a witty bio about loving dogs and hating Mondays. Nothing too revealing, nothing too off-putting. Just a basic 20-something trying to navigate the chaotic world of modern dating. I matched with him pretty quickly. Liam. Tall, dark hair, piercing blue eyes that seemed to stare right through the screen. He had a bad boy vibe, but not in a try-hard way. More like he genuinely didn't give a damn what anyone thought of him. Which, I gotta admit, was kind of intriguing. His profile was minimalist, just a couple of pictures and a one-liner. Here for a good time, now long time. Predictable, maybe, but I wasn't exactly looking for a husband. So I swiped right. He messaged me almost immediately. No cheesy pickup lines, no generic, hey. Just a simple, drinks tonight. Bold. I liked it. We met at a dive bar downtown, the kind of place with sticky floors and questionable bathroom hygiene. Exactly my speed. He was even more attractive in person. That don't give a damn vibe was amplified, like he was radiating a force field of indifference. The conversation flowed easily. We talked about music, movies, our jobs, which we both hated, and our general disdain for the dating scene. He was funny, sarcastic, and surprisingly intelligent. I found myself laughing more than I had in months. After a couple of hours, we decided to head back to his place. I know, rookie mistake. But I was feeling confident, carefree, and honestly, really attracted to him. Plus, I figured, What's the worst that could happen? His apartment was interesting. Minimalist to the extreme. Bare white walls, a futon, a coffee table, and a bookshelf filled with obscure literature. It felt more like a temporary crash pad than a home. But whatever, not my place to judge. We made out for a while. Things got heated. And then, it was fine. Nothing mind-blowing, but not terrible either. We fell asleep afterward, tangled in the sheets. That's when things started to get weird. I woke up in the middle of the night to find Liam sitting up in bed, staring at me. Not in a sweet, affectionate way. More like he was analyzing me, dissecting me with his eyes. "What are you doing?" I mumbled, half asleep. He didn't say anything, just kept staring. It was unnerving. "Liam," I said, my voice a little sharper. "Are you okay?" He blinked, like he was snapping out of a trance. "Yeah," he said, his voice low and husky. "Just admiring you." I didn't buy it, but I was too tired to argue. I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I drifted off, I'd jolt awake, convinced that Liam was still staring at me. It was a long, restless night. The next morning, he was gone. Not just out of the room, but gone from the apartment. No note, no explanation, just vanished. I was annoyed, but not overly concerned. I figured he had an early appointment or something. I got dressed, grabbed my stuff, and let myself out. But as I was walking to the subway, I started getting this weird feeling, like I was being followed. I glanced over my shoulder, but there was no one there. Just a busy city street, full of anonymous faces. I tried to shake it off, but the feeling persisted. I kept looking over my shoulder, and every time I did, I'd catch a glimpse of someone in the crowd who looked vaguely familiar. Tall, dark hair, piercing blue eyes, but it couldn't be him, right? I spent the rest of the day on edge, jumping at every shadow, convinced that Liam was lurking somewhere, watching me. I even called in sick to work, claiming I had a migraine. I just couldn't handle being in public, exposed and vulnerable. That night, I locked all my doors and windows, turned on every light in my apartment, and huddled under the covers, trying to convince myself that I was being paranoid. But then I heard the scratching. It started softly, a faint scraping sound coming from outside my window. I froze, listening intently. It sounded like fingernails dragging against the glass. My heart started pounding. I knew it was him. I grabbed my phone and called 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial the numbers. "There's someone outside my apartment," I whispered into the phone. "I think he's trying to break in." The operator told me to stay calm and that they were sending a police car to my location. I clung to the phone, listening to the dispatcher's calm, reassuring voice. The scratching grew louder, more frantic. I could feel my anxiety spiraling out of control. Then, the window shattered. Glass exploded inward, showering my bedroom with shards. I screamed and scrambled back, away from the window. A figure climbed through the opening. Tall, dark hair, piercing blue eyes. It was Liam. He was smiling. "Hello, darling," he said, his voice eerily calm. "Did you miss me?" I don't remember much after that. Just flashes of terror, screaming, struggling. He grabbed me, dragged me out of bed, and forced me out of the apartment. I fought him with everything I had, kicking, punching, biting. But he was too strong. He had me pinned, helpless. He dragged me down the stairs, out of the building, and into a waiting car. I tried to scream for help, but he clamped his hand over my mouth. The car sped off into the night. I was terrified, convinced that I was going to die. I had no idea where he was taking me, what he was planning to do. But then, something unexpected happened. The car pulled over to the side of the road. Liam got out, opened the back door, and pulled me out after him. We were in the middle of nowhere. I met Sarah on Tinder in what feels like another lifetime. It was during that sweet spot in college, when everyone was experimenting, trying to figure out who they were beyond textbooks and exams. Dating apps were just another part of the exploration. I wasn't looking for anything serious, and neither was she. Or so she said. Her profile was unassuming. A few candid photos of her laughing with friends, hiking, and one artistic shot of her silhouetted against a sunset. Her bio was simple, looking for good vibes and interesting conversations. We matched almost instantly, and the initial messages flowed easily. We bonded over our shared love of obscure indie bands and a mutual disdain for crowded bars. Sarah was different from anyone I'd met on Tinder before. She wasn't just looking for a hookup. She seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything and nothing, from our families and childhoods to our hopes and fears. There was an openness and vulnerability that I found incredibly refreshing. After a week of nonstop texting, we decided to meet up for coffee. I remember being nervous, unsure if the connection we'd built online would translate in person. But the moment I saw her, all my anxieties melted away. She was even more beautiful in person, with a warm smile and eyes that sparkled with intelligence. We talked for hours that day, losing track of time as we delved deeper into each other's lives. It felt like we had known each other forever. We laughed, we shared stories, and we discovered a surprising number of things we had in common. By the end of the date, I was completely smitten. We started seeing each other regularly after that. We went on hikes, explored hidden corners of the city, and spent countless nights talking until dawn. I was falling hard, and I thought she was too. We were inseparable, and I couldn't imagine my life without her. But then things started to change. Subtle shifts at first, almost imperceptible. She became more distant, less responsive to my texts. Our dates became less frequent, and when we did see each other, she seemed distracted, like her mind was somewhere else. I tried to talk to her about it, but she brushed it off, saying she was just stressed with school. I wanted to believe her, but something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something from me. One night, I decided to surprise her at her apartment. I knew she had a big exam coming up, and I wanted to bring her dinner and offer some support. I texted her to let her know I was coming, but she didn't respond. I assumed she was busy studying and didn't want to be disturbed. When I arrived at her apartment, the door was unlocked. I cautiously let myself in, calling out her name. No response. The apartment was dark and eerily quiet. I walked through the living room, heading towards her bedroom, when I heard a muffled sound coming from behind the closed door. My heart started pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to expect, but I had a bad feeling. I slowly opened the door and peeked inside. What I saw next will forever be burned into my memory. Sarah was in her bed, but she wasn't alone. There was another man with her, and they were more than studying. I stood there frozen, unable to move or speak. The scene played out in front of me in slow motion, each detail etched into my mind. The shock and betrayal were overwhelming, like a physical blow to the chest. Finally, Sarah noticed me. Her eyes widened in horror, and she gasped. "What are you doing here?" she stammered, pulling the covers up to her chest. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, tears welling up in my eyes. I turned and ran out of the apartment, not wanting to hear her excuses or explanations. I didn't sleep that night. I replayed the scene over and over in my head, trying to make sense of it. How could she do this to me? How could she lie to me so easily? The next day, I texted her, telling her that we were done. I didn't want to hear her side of the story. I didn't want to know why she had betrayed me. I just wanted to erase her from my life. She texted back, begging me to talk to her, to give her a chance to explain. But I refused. I blocked her number and deleted her from all my social media accounts. I wanted to pretend that she never existed, but even though I tried to forget about her, she lingered in my thoughts. I couldn't understand how someone who had seemed so genuine and caring could be capable of such deceit. It shook my faith in people, and I became cynical and distrustful. It took me a long time to heal from that experience. I avoided dating apps for years, afraid of getting hurt again. I closed myself off to new relationships, convinced that everyone was just pretending, that no one was truly honest or sincere. Eventually, I started to open up again. I realized that not everyone is like Sarah, that there are still good people out there who are capable of love and commitment. But I'll never forget the pain she caused me, the way she shattered my illusions about love and trust. Even now, years later, I still find myself wondering about her. What happened to her? Did she ever regret what she did? Did she ever think about me? I'll probably never know the answers to those questions, but I've learned to accept the experience as a part of my past, a lesson learned the hard way. I'm more cautious now, more discerning about who I let into my life, and I've come to realize that sometimes the people you meet on dating apps aren't who they seem to be. Sometimes they're hiding secrets, leading double lives, and capable of unimaginable betrayal. I still don't know if she was a psychopath or just a terrible person. She just had this switch in her demeanor, like she was an entirely different person. It almost felt intentional, like I was a pawn in her game. I'm still not sure why she did it, I never thought I'd be sharing this story. Not because it's particularly dramatic or unique, but because it dredges up a level of vulnerability and self-deception I'm not proud of. It started, as so many questionable decisions do these days, with a swipe. It was late one night. I was bored, and yeah, maybe a little lonely. I'd been single for a while, and the whole dating scene felt like a tedious chore I kept putting off. So I opened Tinder. There he was, Liam. A name as generic as his perfectly sculpted features and the carefully curated photos of him hiking, volunteering, and, of course, brooding attractively at a sunset. His bio was short but intriguing. Aspiring writer. Seeker of genuine connection. Let's skip the small talk. Ugh. I know. Even now, writing it out, I can hear the chorus of eye rolls from my friends. But in that moment, fueled by exhaustion and a desperate craving for something beyond another night of Netflix and takeout, I swiped right. We matched instantly. He messaged me almost immediately, not with a cheesy pickup line, but with the surprisingly insightful question about a book I had mentioned in my profile. It was refreshing. He actually seemed interested in me, in what I had to say, not just in my profile picture. Over the next few days, we exchanged messages constantly. We talked about our passions, our fears, our dreams. He was intelligent, articulate, and seemed genuinely empathetic. He listened more than he talked, asked thoughtful questions, and remembered details I'd mentioned weeks earlier. It was intoxicating. I found myself looking forward to his messages, feeling a flutter of excitement whenever my phone buzzed with his name. He was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Intellectual, kind, and attractive, with a dash of artistic sensitivity. The red flags were there, of course, but I was too blinded by the initial rush to see them clearly. He was vague about his job, claiming to be a freelance creative consultant that allowed him to work from anywhere. He avoided direct questions about his past, deflecting with charming anecdotes and vague promises of future revelations. And then there was the intensity. He showered me with compliments, called me his muse, and declared that he'd been waiting his whole life to meet someone like me. It was flattering, sure, but also a little overwhelming, like he was trying to fast forward our connection before it had a chance to develop naturally. Despite my reservations, I agreed to meet him. We decided on a small, out-of-the-way cafe that was supposed to be charming and authentic. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a corner table, bathed in the soft glow of a vintage lamp. He looked even better in person than in his photos, his eyes sparkling with what I mistook for genuine excitement. The date started off well. We talked for hours, lost in a stream of conversation that felt easy and natural. He asked about my work, my family, my hopes for the future. He listened intently, nodding and smiling, making me feel like the most interesting person in the world. But as the evening wore on, things started to shift. He began to steer the conversation towards darker topics. Existentialism, the meaninglessness of life, the inherent corruption of society. It wasn't that I disagreed with his views, necessarily, but the intensity with which he expressed them was unsettling. He spoke with a fervor that bordered on fanaticism, his eyes burning with a strange, almost manic energy. Then he started asking about my vulnerabilities. He wanted to know my deepest fears, my darkest secrets, the things I was most ashamed of. At first, I hesitated, but he was so disarming, so seemingly understanding, that I found myself revealing things I'd never told anyone before. He listened without judgment, nodding sympathetically, making me feel like I could confide in him completely. It was a dangerous illusion. As the night progressed, his behavior became increasingly erratic. He would swing from moments of intense connection and vulnerability to periods of cold detachment, his eyes clouding over with a distant, almost vacant expression. He started making subtle, unsettling comments, things that seemed innocent on the surface, but carried a darker undertone. He mentioned that he knew a lot about me, more than I realized. He alluded to having special skills that allowed him to see through people's facades. He even hinted that he knew things about my past that I thought were long buried. It was unnerving, to say the least. By the end of the date, I was a nervous wreck. I wanted nothing more than to escape, to get away from his intensity and his unsettling gaze. But he insisted on walking me home. I reluctantly agreed, hoping that the presence of other people on the street would offer some sense of security. As we walked, he continued to talk, his voice a low, hypnotic murmur. He told me that he felt a deep connection to me, that we were destined to be together. He said that he could see into my soul, that he knew me better than I knew myself. I tried to politely brush him off, but he wouldn't let up. He kept pressing, his words becoming more insistent, more possessive. By the time we reached my apartment building, I was terrified. I quickly thanked him for the date and tried to slip inside, but he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. He stared at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "I know you feel it too," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Don't deny our connection." I wrenched my arm away and stumbled into the building, slamming the door behind me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, wide awake, replaying the events of the evening in my mind. The charm, the intelligence, the vulnerability. It had all been a carefully constructed facade, designed to manipulate and deceive. I'd fallen for it. Hook, line, and sinker. The next morning, I blocked him on Tinder and every other social media platform I could think of. I changed my phone number and avoided going out alone for weeks. I was convinced that he was watching me, that he knew where I lived, that he was waiting for an opportunity to strike. I told a few close friends about what had happened, but they dismissed it as just a bad date, a cautionary tale about the dangers of online dating. They couldn't understand the depth of my fear, the sense that I'd narrowly escaped something truly sinister. It's been over a year since that night, and I still think about him sometimes. I see faces that remind me of him in crowds, hear snippets of conversations that echo his words. I know it's probably just my anxiety playing tricks on me, but the feeling of unease never fully goes away. I still use Tinder occasionally, but I'm much more cautious now. I do thorough background checks, meet in public places, and always tell a friend where I'm going. I've learned a valuable lesson about the importance of trusting my instincts, of recognizing the red flags before it's too late. I also learned that online dating could be dangerous for some individuals, especially those who are seeking emotional fulfillment. This is an aspect of online dating that is not often discussed, but it's vital to acknowledge the risks. You can never truly know who is on the other side of the screen. It's a lesson I wish I'd learned sooner. And I share this not for sympathy, but to remind everyone that while genuine connection is possible anywhere, safety and awareness must always come first. It's easy to get caught up in the fantasy of finding someone special, but never, ever, let your guard down completely. I learned my lesson, and I hope my story can help prevent someone else from making the same mistake. Even now, the idea that I was so easily manipulated still mortifies me. But I also realize that I'm not alone, that many people have fallen prey to similar tactics. And hopefully, by sharing my experience, I can help others recognize the warning signs and avoid a potentially dangerous situation. The world is already a difficult enough place without adding dangerous relationships to the mix. It started like any other Tinder conversation, a string of witty remarks, playful jabs, and carefully curated selfies designed to project an image of someone effortlessly cool and vaguely interesting. I was freshly out of a long-term relationship, wading back into the murky waters of online dating with a mix of trepidation and excitement. His profile was unassuming, a few candid shots of him hiking in the mountains, attending concerts, and generally looking like someone who enjoyed the outdoors and had a decent social life. His bio was short and sweet, looking for good conversation and maybe a hiking buddy. No drama. Seemed harmless enough. His name was Alex. He was a few years older than me, worked as a software engineer, and claimed to be a hopeless romantic with a penchant for bad puns. The conversation flowed easily. We bonded over our shared love of indie music, our mutual dislike of reality TV, and our bizarre fascination with true crime podcasts. He seemed genuine, intelligent, and refreshingly normal compared to some of the other characters I'd encountered on the app. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet up for coffee. I wasn't expecting fireworks, but I was cautiously optimistic. He suggested a small, independent cafe near my apartment. It was a low-pressure setting, perfect for a first date. He was exactly as he appeared in his photos, maybe even a little more charming in person. He had a warm smile, kind eyes, and a genuine interest in getting to know me. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, losing track of time in the easy rhythm of conversation. It felt good. It felt right. I even laughed at a couple of his bad puns, which is saying something. We went on a few more dates after that. Hikes in the park, dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant, a movie night at my place. Each time, I found myself liking him more and more. He was thoughtful, considerate, and surprisingly vulnerable. He talked openly about his past, his fears, and his dreams for the future. He listened intently when I spoke, making me feel heard and understood. I started to let my guard down, allowing myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I had stumbled upon something real. I was cautiously falling for him. Then, the little things started. Subtle inconsistencies in his stories, small details that didn't quite add up, a fleeting look of discomfort when I asked about his family, a strange reluctance to talk about his past relationships. I chalked it up to nerves, to the awkwardness of getting to know someone new. Everyone has their secrets, their insecurities. I didn't want to pry. I didn't want to ruin what we had. But the little things kept piling up, like grains of sand slowly burying a beautiful beach. One night, we were at my apartment, watching a movie. He excused himself to go to the bathroom, and while he was gone, his phone lit up with a notification. I didn't mean to snoop, but the message caught my eye. It was from a contact simply labeled L. The message read, "Are you still seeing her? You promised me you'd end it." My heart dropped. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. He was seeing someone else. He had lied to me. When he came back, I tried to act normal, but my mind was racing. I couldn't shake the image of that message, the weight of his betrayal. I confronted him about it later that night, after he had left. I sent him a text, asking him who L was. He didn't respond. The next day, I tried calling him. No answer. I texted him again, demanding an explanation. Nothing. He had ghosted me. Just like that, he was gone, vanished into the digital ether, from whence he came. I was hurt, angry, and confused. I couldn't understand how someone could be so callous, so deceptive. I had opened myself up to him, allowed myself to be vulnerable, and he had repaid me with lies and betrayal. I spent the next few days replaying our relationship in my head, searching for clues, for signs that I had missed. I scrutinized every conversation, every gesture, every fleeting expression. And then I started to notice things, patterns, red flags that I had ignored, rationalized, or simply overlooked. His stories about his job were vague and inconsistent. He never talked about his coworkers, his projects, or his responsibilities. He claimed to work from home, which made it difficult to verify his claims. He was always evasive when I asked about his family. He said he wasn't close to them, that they lived far away. But he never offered any details, never mentioned their names or their professions. He had a strange aversion to social media. He didn't have Facebook, Instagram, or any other online presence. He said he valued his privacy, but it seemed excessive, almost paranoid. And then there were the disappearances. He would often go offline for hours, sometimes even days, without any explanation. He would claim he was busy with work, but his excuses always felt flimsy and unconvincing. The more I thought about it, the more suspicious he seemed. It was as if he had deliberately constructed a false persona, a carefully crafted facade designed to deceive me. I started to wonder who he really was. What was he hiding? I decided to do some digging. I started with a simple Google search, hoping to find some information about him, some confirmation of his existence. But nothing came up. No social media profiles, no professional listings, no mentions in any online articles or directories. It was as if he didn't exist. I tried searching for his name and his profession, but the results were generic and unhelpful. I tried searching for his name and the city he claimed to live in, but still nothing. It was as if he had deliberately erased himself from the internet. That's when I started to get really scared. I began to suspect that he wasn't who he said he was, that he was using a fake name, a fake identity, that he was hiding something dark, something dangerous. I decided to take my investigation offline. I drove to the address he had given me, the address of his apartment. It was a rundown building in a seedy part of town. I buzzed his apartment, but no one answered. I waited outside for a while, hoping to catch a glimpse of him, but he never showed up. I talked to the building manager, asking if he knew Alex. The manager said he had never heard of him, that no one by that name lived in the building. I showed him Alex's picture, the one from his Tinder profile. The manager shook his head. He said he had never seen that man before. That's when I knew for sure that something was terribly wrong. I went to the police. I told them everything about Alex, about the inconsistencies, about the disappearances, about the lack of any online presence. They listened patiently, but they seemed skeptical. They said it was probably just a case of catfishing, that he was likely just a harmless loser who was too insecure to use his real identity. They said there was nothing they could do unless I had been physically harmed or threatened. They advised me to block him on Tinder and move on with my life. I was frustrated and disappointed, but I understood their limitations. They couldn't investigate every online dating scam, every case of mistaken identity. But I couldn't let it go. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in danger, that Alex was still out there, watching me, waiting for an opportunity to strike. I decided to continue my investigation on my own. I spent hours poring over his Tinder profile, searching for any clues, any details that might lead me to his real identity. I noticed something I had overlooked before: the background in his photos. In several of his pictures, I could see glimpses of a distinctive building, a large, imposing structure with a unique architectural style. I recognized it immediately. It was an abandoned mental hospital located on the outskirts of town. The hospital had been closed down years ago due to allegations of abuse and neglect. It was rumored to be haunted, a place where unspeakable things had happened. I shuddered at the thought of Alex spending time there, of him taking those pictures. What was he doing there? What was he hiding? I decided to go to the hospital. I knew it was dangerous, that I could be putting myself in harm's way, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was the key to unlocking the mystery of Alex's identity. I drove out to the hospital late one night, armed with a flashlight and a healthy dose of fear. The building was even more imposing in person, a dark, hulking mass against the night sky. I parked my car a safe distance away and approached the hospital on foot. The grounds were overgrown and neglected, the air thick with the smell of decay. I found an opening in the fence and slipped inside. The hospital was eerily silent, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the wind. I made my way inside, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The interior was even more dilapidated than I had imagined. Walls were covered in graffiti, floors were littered with debris, and the air was heavy with the stench of mildew and rot. I wandered through the empty hallways, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the weight of the hospital's history, the suffering of its former patients. I came to a large room, a former ward, with rows of empty beds. In the center of the room, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was a makeshift shrine, a collection of photos, candles, and other objects arranged on a small table. The photos were of me, pictures I had posted on my social media accounts, pictures I had sent to Alex. I realized then that he had been stalking me, that he had been watching me for a long time, that he knew more about me than I could have ever imagined. And then I heard a sound. I swiped right on him, I swear. I'd been on Tinder for a while, doing the whole casual dating thing, and honestly, most of it was pretty forgettable. Bad dates, awkward conversations, guys who sent unsolicited pictures, you know the drill. But then there was Jake. His profile was different, not in a flashy, trying too hard kind of way, but in a quiet, intriguing way. His pictures were all candid shots, laughing with friends, hiking in the mountains, reading in a coffee shop. He looked genuine, down to earth. His bio was simple: looking for someone to share adventures with. Bonus points if you can identify obscure movie references. I chuckled and swiped right. We matched almost instantly. Our conversations flowed easily from the start. We talked about everything from our favorite books and music to our childhood memories and biggest fears. He was intelligent, witty, and surprisingly empathetic. I found myself looking forward to his messages, feeling a connection that I hadn't felt with anyone else on the app. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet up for coffee. I was nervous, but also excited. He seemed perfect on paper, and I was eager to see if the chemistry translated in person. The date went even better than I could have hoped. He was even more charming in person, with a warm smile and a disarming sense of humor. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. The coffee shop closed, and we didn't even realize it. We ended up walking around the city, continuing our conversation until the early hours of the morning. By the end of the night, I was completely smitten. We made plans to see each other again the following weekend. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. We went on dates to museums, concerts, and picnics in the park. We stayed up late talking, sharing secrets, and dreaming about the future. I was falling hard for Jake, and I thought he was falling for me too. He was attentive, affectionate, and always made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. He even started leaving little notes for me on my car and sending sweet texts throughout the day. He would often say he didn't know what he did to deserve me. I introduced him to my friends, and they loved him. Everything felt perfect. Too perfect, maybe? It was around the third month that I started noticing things. Little inconsistencies, odd quirks, things that I initially brushed off as just my imagination. But they started piling up, nagging at the back of my mind, making me question everything I thought I knew about Jake. The first thing I noticed was his phone. He was always on it, constantly texting or browsing, but he was incredibly secretive about it. If I ever glanced at his screen, he would quickly turn it away, claiming he was just checking the news or responding to a work email. He'd get defensive if I asked him about it, saying I was being nosy and invading his privacy. I tried to let it go, telling myself that everyone is entitled to privacy, but it still bothered me. Then there were the gaps in his stories. He would tell me anecdotes about his past, his childhood, his friends, but certain details would always be missing. If I pressed him for more information, he would become vague and evasive, changing the subject or claiming he couldn't remember. It was like he was carefully constructing a narrative, leaving out anything that didn't fit his carefully curated image. I also started noticing that he seemed to avoid certain places. He never wanted to go to restaurants or bars that were popular with the younger crowd. He would always suggest quieter, more obscure places, claiming he didn't like crowds. At first, I thought he was just being considerate of my preferences, but then I realized he seemed genuinely uncomfortable in certain environments. He would become tense and anxious, scanning the room as if he was looking for someone or something. One night, we were walking down the street when we passed a group of people laughing and talking. Jake suddenly stopped, his face paling. He grabbed my arm tightly, pulling me away from the group. When I asked him what was wrong, he said he thought he saw someone he knew, someone he didn't want to talk to. He wouldn't elaborate, and he seemed shaken for the rest of the evening. The final straw was when I found a picture of him with another woman. I know, cliché, right? But it wasn't just any picture. It was an old photo, faded and creased, tucked away in a box of his belongings. The woman in the photo looked remarkably like me. Same hair, same eyes, same smile. It was unsettling. When I confronted him about it, he denied knowing her, claiming the photo must have been planted there. He got angry, accusing me of being paranoid and insecure. I wanted to believe him, but the doubt was already planted. I started doing some digging. I know, it sounds crazy, but I needed to know the truth. I scoured the internet, searching for any information about Jake. I couldn't find anything. No social media profiles, no public records, nothing. It was like he didn't exist before he matched with me on Tinder. I confided in my best friend, Sarah, telling her everything that had been going on. She was concerned, urging me to break things off with Jake. She said he sounded like he was hiding something, and that I shouldn't ignore my gut feelings. I knew she was right, but I was still hesitant. I cared about Jake, and I didn't want to believe he was lying to me. One night, I decided to follow him. I know, it sounds stalkerish, but I needed answers. He told me he was going to a late-night work meeting, but something felt off. I waited until he left my apartment. Then I got in my car and followed him. He drove to a part of town I had never been to before, a rundown industrial area with abandoned warehouses and dimly lit streets. He parked his car in front of one of the warehouses and went inside. I waited outside, my heart pounding in my chest. After about an hour, he came out, accompanied by another man. They talked for a few minutes. Then the man handed Jake a package. Jake took the package and drove away. I followed him back to his apartment, watching as he went inside. I waited outside for another hour, debating what to do. I knew I should just leave, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Finally, I decided to confront him. I walked up to his apartment door and knocked. He opened the door, looking surprised to see me. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice strained. "I followed you," I said, my voice trembling. "I saw you meet with that man. What was in the package?" He hesitated, then sighed. "It's nothing really," he said. "Just some work stuff." "Don't lie to me, Jake," I said. "I know you're hiding something. Who are you?" He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and desperation. "Okay, fine," he said. "I'll tell you the truth. But you're not going to like it." He led me inside his apartment, and I immediately noticed something was different. The apartment was usually clean and organized, but tonight it was a mess. Clothes were scattered everywhere, drawers were open, and there was a strange smell in the air. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He took a deep breath and started talking. He told me his real name wasn't Jake. It was Daniel. He said he was running from someone dangerous. He wouldn't tell me who, but he said they were after him and anyone who got close to him. He said he knew he should have told me sooner, but he was afraid of scaring me away. He said he really cared about me and didn't want to lose me. I didn't know what to believe. Was he telling the truth? Or was this just another lie? I looked around the apartment, my eyes landing on a framed photo on his desk. It was a picture of him with a group of people, all wearing matching uniforms. The uniforms had a strange symbol on them, something I had never seen before. "Who are they?" I asked, pointing at the photo. He hesitated, then said, "They're friends." I didn't believe him. I grabbed the photo and ran out of the apartment, back to my car. He didn't try to stop me. I drove home, my mind racing. I spent the rest of the night researching the symbol on the uniforms. I finally found something. It was the symbol of a cult, a dangerous and secretive organization with a history of violence and manipulation. I was terrified. I realized that everything Jake had told me was a lie. He wasn't just running from someone. He was a member of a dangerous cult. The package he had received was probably something sinister, something that could put me in danger too. I knew I had to get away from him. I packed a bag, grabbed my passport, and left my apartment. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even Sarah. I didn't trust anyone. I drove to the airport and bought a one-way ticket to another country. I needed to disappear, to start a new life, far away from Jake and his cult. It's been several years since that night. I'm living in a small town in Europe, working as a waitress. I've changed my name and cut off all contact with my old life. I still have nightmares about Jake, about the cult, about the lies. I'm always looking over my shoulder, afraid they'll find me. I know it sounds paranoid, but I can't shake the feeling that they're still out there, watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. It was just my imagination until I found that picture of him with that woman. I wasn't always so cautious. Before it happened, I was your typical mid-20s, slightly naive, always optimistic dater. Tinder was just a fun way to meet new people, maybe find connection, or at least have a good story to tell. I swiped right liberally, trusting my gut, which, let's face it, had terrible taste. I went on countless first dates that fizzled out, endured awkward silences, and politely excused myself from conversations about cryptocurrency and taxidermy. But it was all part of the game, right? Until it wasn't. His name was Alex, and his profile was perfectly curated. Pictures of him hiking scenic trails, volunteering at an animal shelter, and looking effortlessly cool at a music festival. His bio was witty and self-deprecating, and his opening message was charming, not creepy. We messaged back and forth for a couple of weeks, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He asked about my passions, my dreams, and my favorite books. He even remembered details from our earlier conversations, a small but significant detail that made me feel seen. When he asked me out, I didn't hesitate. We met at a cozy Italian restaurant in my neighborhood. He was even more attractive in person, with kind eyes and a disarming smile. The conversation flowed easily, and we laughed a lot. He seemed genuine, intelligent, and compassionate. He even paid attention when I talked about my job, which was a welcome change from the usual date who glazed over as soon as I mentioned spreadsheets and marketing strategies. After dinner, we walked along the riverfront, talking and laughing. He told me about his work as a software developer, his love for travel, and his family. He seemed normal, well-adjusted, and genuinely interested in building a connection. When he kissed me goodnight, it felt natural, not forced. I went home feeling giddy and hopeful. We went on a few more dates over the next couple of weeks. We saw a movie, went to a jazz club, and even cooked dinner together at my apartment. He was always respectful, attentive, and fun to be around. I started to let my guard down, imagining a future with him. Maybe this was it, I thought. Maybe I had finally found someone special on Tinder, against all odds. Then, the little thing started. He started texting me constantly, throughout the day and late into the night. At first, I didn't mind. It was nice to feel wanted, to know he was thinking of me. But then it became excessive. He would get upset if I didn't respond immediately, even if I was at work or out with friends. He started asking where I was going, who I was with, and what I was doing every minute of the day. He also started subtly criticizing my appearance. He would make comments about my clothes, my hair, or my makeup, always framing it as helpful advice. He'd say things like, "That dress isn't really your color," or "Maybe you should try a different hairstyle." At first, I brushed it off, thinking he was just trying to be honest. But the comments became more frequent and more cutting, slowly chipping away at my confidence. Then came the isolation. He started discouraging me from spending time with my friends and family. He would say things like, "They don't really understand you like I do," or "You're better off spending time with me." He would guilt me into canceling plans, making me feel selfish for wanting to see other people. Slowly, I started to withdraw from my social life, spending more and more time with him. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I tried to talk to him about it, but he would always deny it, gaslighting me into thinking I was overreacting. He would say things like, "You're being paranoid," or "You're imagining things." He was so convincing that I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was just being insecure, I thought. Maybe I was reading too much into things. The final straw came one night when I was out with my friends for a birthday dinner. Alex had been texting me all night, demanding to know when I was coming home. I told him I would be back soon, but he kept pressuring me, becoming increasingly agitated. Finally, he called me, his voice laced with anger. "Where are you?" he demanded. "I told you I was going to be home soon," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "You're lying," he said. "I can hear other people talking in the background. You're with other guys, aren't you?" "No, I'm with my friends," I said, exasperated. "Don't lie to me," he screamed. "I know you're cheating on me." I hung up the phone, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't believe what he was saying, how he was treating me. I knew I had to end things, right then and there. I texted him a simple message, "We're done." The aftermath was a nightmare. He bombarded me with calls and texts, begging me to take him back. When I didn't respond, he started threatening me. He said he would ruin my life, that he would tell everyone my secrets, that he would make me regret ever leaving him. I was terrified. I blocked his number, but he created new accounts to continue harassing me. He even started showing up at my apartment, banging on my door and screaming my name. I was afraid to leave my house. I felt like I was being stalked, trapped in a living hell. Finally, I went to the police. They took my statement and advised me to get a restraining order. It was a long and difficult process, but eventually, I was granted one. It didn't stop him completely, but it gave me some sense of security. I moved to a new apartment, changed my phone number, and deleted all my social media accounts. I cut off contact with everyone who knew him. I wanted to disappear, to erase him from my life completely. It took me a long time to recover from the experience. I struggled with anxiety and depression. I had nightmares about him. I was afraid to trust anyone, especially men. I felt ashamed and embarrassed, like it was my fault for being so naive, for trusting the wrong person. But slowly, I started to heal. I went to therapy, where I learned to process my emotions and rebuild my self-esteem. I reconnected with my friends and family, who provided me with unwavering support. I started to reclaim my life, one small step at a time. The experience taught me to always be aware of the red flags, the constant texting, the subtle criticisms, the isolation, the gaslighting. These were all warning signs that I ignored because I wanted to believe in the person I thought he was. I learned that it's okay to trust your gut, even if it means ending a relationship that seems perfect on the surface. It taught me the importance of setting boundaries and enforcing them, even when it's uncomfortable. Most importantly, it taught me that I am worthy of love and respect, and that I deserve to be treated with kindness and compassion. I'm still cautious when it comes to dating. I take things slowly, paying close attention to the other person's behavior and words. I'm more upfront about my boundaries and expectations. I'm no longer afraid to walk away if something doesn't feel right. I even went back on Tinder eventually. It took me a long time to feel ready, but I didn't want to let one bad experience ruin my chances of finding love. I'm still optimistic, but I'm also realistic. I know that there are risks involved in online dating, but I'm willing to take them, as long as I stay aware and protect myself. It's a new world, dating, and it's hard. The past has taught me that, no matter how good things seem on the surface, you never truly know someone until you've seen how they react under pressure. And sometimes, the person you thought you knew turns out to be someone else entirely. That is why staying aware is very important. Okay, so, you know how everyone says Tinder is just a meat market or a hookup app? I used to think so too, honestly. I mean, I wasn't exactly swiping for true love. More like entertainment, maybe a distraction from the soul-crushing monotony of my office job. But then, something happened that completely changed my perspective, something that still gives me the creeps just thinking about it. It all started pretty normally. Swiping, matching, the usual small talk. I matched with this guy, Liam. He seemed different. Not in a movie protagonist kind of way, but like he had a different approach to the whole Tinder thing. His profile was simple, just a few candid photos of him hiking, and a short bio saying he was looking for someone to explore the city with. No cheesy pickup lines, no shirtless selfies, just normal. We started chatting, and he was surprisingly engaging. He didn't just ask the typical questions. He actually listened to my answers, remembered things I'd said in previous conversations. We talked about our favorite books, movies, music, even our anxieties and fears. It was refreshing. After a week or so of talking, we decided to meet up. He suggested this little hole-in-the-wall coffee shop I'd never heard of, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. It wasn't flashy or trendy, just cozy and unassuming. When I walked in, he was already there, sitting at a table by the window, a book in his hand. He looked just like his pictures, maybe even a little more handsome in person. We hugged hello, and I immediately felt comfortable. The conversation flowed easily, and we talked for hours, losing track of time. It felt like I'd known him for years, even though we'd just met. We went on a few more dates after that. A museum, a park, a concert. Each time, I felt myself getting closer to him, more comfortable, more invested. He was kind, intelligent, funny, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. It felt like I'd finally found someone who actually saw me, not just the curated version of myself I presented to the world. Then, things started to get weird. It started subtly. Little things I initially dismissed as coincidences or overthinking. He would mention things I hadn't told him, details about my life that I was sure I hadn't shared. He'd suggest restaurants I'd been wanting to try, places I'd only mentioned to my closest friends. He'd even quote lines from my favorite books, lines I'd never discussed with him. At first, I thought he was just being observant, paying attention to my social media, or maybe even asking my friends about me. But then, it started happening more frequently, and the details became more specific, more personal. One night, we were at my apartment watching a movie. I went to grab some snacks from the kitchen, and when I came back, he was staring at a photo on my bookshelf. It was a picture of me and my sister, taken when we were kids. I hadn't looked at that photo in years. "You look just like her," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Yeah, that's my sister," I replied, trying to sound casual. "No, I mean you look just like her when she was gone." I froze. My sister had passed away when we were teenagers. It was a deeply personal and painful topic, one I rarely discussed with anyone. I definitely hadn't told Liam about it. "What do you mean, gone?" I asked, my voice shaking. He didn't answer, just kept staring at the photo, his eyes glazed over. "Liam," I said, louder this time, trying to snap him out of it. He blinked, as if waking from a trance. "Sorry," he said, shaking his head. "I don't know what came over me. What were we talking about?" I didn't push it, but the incident left me shaken. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that Liam knew more about me than he should. I started paying closer attention to his behavior, trying to figure out how he was getting this information. I checked his social media, but there was nothing there. He barely used it, just a few generic posts and photos. I even tried to subtly ask him about his friends and family, but he always deflected, changing the subject or giving vague answers. The more I investigated, the more suspicious I became. It was like he was deliberately hiding something, keeping me in the dark. Then, one night, I discovered the truth. I was at his apartment, waiting for him to come back from a quick errand. He'd left his laptop open on the kitchen counter, and I couldn't resist taking a peek. I know it was wrong, but I was desperate for answers. I started scrolling through his browser history, and what I found made my blood run cold. Page after page of search results about me. My name, my address, my phone number, my social media profiles, even old blog posts I'd completely forgotten about. He'd been tracking me, obsessively researching every aspect of my life. But that wasn't the worst part. As I scrolled further down, I found something even more disturbing. Links to online forums and websites dedicated to stalking and harassing women. Threads where people shared personal information and photos of their targets, discussing ways to manipulate and control them. And then I saw it. A thread with my name on it. Inside, there were photos of me, taken without my knowledge. Pictures of me walking down the street, sitting in coffee shops, even inside my own apartment. Someone had been watching me, documenting my every move. And the person who started the thread? Liam. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I couldn't believe it. The man I'd been falling for, the man I trusted, was a stalker, a manipulator, a potential threat. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking. I needed to get out of there, to escape before he came back. I grabbed my purse and keys and ran out of the apartment, not stopping until I was back in my own building, safe behind locked doors. I called the police, told them everything. They took my statement and promised to investigate, but they said they couldn't do anything until they had more evidence. I spent the next few weeks living in fear, constantly looking over my shoulder, terrified that Liam would show up at my door. I changed my locks, installed security cameras, and even started carrying pepper spray. The police eventually found him. They discovered a hidden room in his apartment, filled with surveillance equipment, photos, and personal information about dozens of women. He was arrested and charged with stalking and harassment. I testified against him in court, reliving the nightmare I'd experienced. It was difficult, but I knew I had to do it, not just for myself, but for all the other women he'd victimized. Liam was convicted and sentenced to several years in prison. I felt a sense of relief, knowing that he was finally behind bars, unable to hurt anyone else. But the experience left a lasting impact on me. I'm still wary of online dating, hesitant to trust anyone I meet online. I'm more cautious about sharing personal information, more aware of the risks and dangers that lurk in the shadows of the internet. And every time I swipe through Tinder, I can't help but wonder if I'll ever truly be safe, if I'll ever be able to trust someone again without the fear of being betrayed, of being stalked, of being hurt. Tinder is not always safe, and that no matter what anyone else thinks, you should trust your gut and get out. Never worry about offending someone because it isn't worth your life. Okay, so, rewind to about 2 years ago. I was fresh out of a pretty nasty breakup, feeling super lonely, and thought, hey, why not try Tinder? I know, cliché, right? But everyone was doing it, and I figured it couldn't hurt to put myself out there, maybe meet some new people, and honestly, just distract myself from the pit of despair I was currently residing in. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just some casual fun, maybe a rebound to prove to myself that I was still desirable. You know, the usual post-breakup stuff. I created a profile, put up some decent photos, carefully curated to show off my good angles naturally, wrote a witty bio about my love for hiking and craft beer, and started swiping. It was a bit of a rush at first, seeing all those matches pop up. It was a nice ego boost, even if most of the conversations were pretty bland. Then I matched with Liam. His profile was pretty standard, some outdoors pics, a photo with a dog, a bio that mentioned something about being a laid-back guy with the passion for adventure. Nothing particularly stood out, but he was cute, and his opening message was actually somewhat engaging, not just the usual hey or WID. We started chatting, and I have to admit, I was immediately drawn in. He was funny, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything, our hobbies, our favorite movies, our childhood dreams. It felt easy and natural. After a few days of chatting, he suggested we meet up for a drink. I was a little hesitant at first. I'd only known him online for a few days, and I'm usually pretty cautious about meeting people from the internet. But he seemed so genuine, and I was so eager for some human connection, that I decided to throw caution to the wind and say yes. We agreed to meet at a bar near my apartment on a Friday night. The day of the date, I was a nervous wreck. I spent hours trying to decide what to wear, agonizing over every little detail. I wanted to make a good impression, but I also didn't want to seem like I was trying too hard. I eventually settled on a simple black dress and some comfortable shoes, figuring it was a good balance between casual and put together. When I arrived at the bar, Liam was already there, waiting for me. He looked even better in person than he did in his photos. He stood up to greet me, gave me a warm hug, and I immediately felt a sense of relief wash over me. This was going to be okay. The date started off great. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. He was even more charming and witty in person than he was online. He listened attentively when I spoke, and made me feel like I was the only person in the room. I found myself really enjoying his company, and I started to think that maybe, just maybe, this could be something special. But as the night wore on, things started to get a little off. He started asking me some pretty personal questions, things that I wasn't really comfortable discussing with someone I just met. He wanted to know about my past relationships, my family history, my deepest fears. I tried to deflect the questions, but he was persistent, and I started to feel like I was being interrogated. Then, he started making comments about my appearance that made me feel uncomfortable. He complimented my body in a way that felt objectifying and made me feel like he was only interested in me for my physical attributes. He said things like, "You have a really sexy body, and I bet you look amazing in lingerie." I tried to brush it off, but his words made me feel uneasy and violated. As the night progressed, he became increasingly touchy-feely. He kept putting his hand on my arm, my leg, my back. Each time he touched me, I felt a shiver of discomfort run down my spine. I tried to subtly pull away, but he didn't seem to notice or care. He just kept touching me, making me feel trapped and powerless. By the end of the night, I was completely creeped out and wanted nothing more than to get away from him. I made up an excuse about having to get up early the next morning and told him I had to go. He seemed disappointed, but he didn't argue. He walked me to my car, and as I was getting in, he leaned in and tried to kiss me. I turned my head away, and he ended up kissing me on the cheek. I quickly got in the car, locked the doors, and drove away as fast as I could. I felt disgusted and violated. I couldn't believe that I had been so naive and trusting. I had let my guard down and allowed myself to be vulnerable with someone who turned out to be a complete creep. When I got home, I immediately took a shower, trying to wash away the feeling of his touch. I changed into my pajamas, crawled into bed, and cried myself to sleep. The next morning, I woke up feeling even worse than I did the night before. I felt ashamed, embarrassed, and angry at myself for putting myself in that situation. I replayed the night over and over in my head, trying to figure out what I could have done differently. I decided to block Liam on Tinder and erase him from my life. I didn't want to have anything to do with him ever again, but the experience had a lasting impact on me. It changed the way I viewed safety and made me realize that I couldn't trust everyone I met online. I became much more cautious about meeting people from dating apps and made sure to take extra precautions to protect myself. I started doing things like meeting people in public places, telling a friend where I was going and who I was meeting, and sharing my location with them. I also started trusting my gut more and paying attention to red flags. If someone made me feel uncomfortable or violated, I would immediately cut off contact. It took me a long time to recover from that experience, but it ultimately made me a stronger and more resilient person. I learned that it's okay to be cautious and to prioritize my safety above all else. I also learned that I'm not alone and that many other women have had similar experiences with online dating. I still use Tinder occasionally, but I'm much more careful about who I match with and who I choose to meet in person. I've also learned to be more assertive and to stand up for myself when someone makes me feel uncomfortable. That experience with Liam was a harsh reminder that not everyone online is who they seem to be, and that it's important to protect yourself. It changed my perspective on safety forever, and I'm grateful for the lessons I learned, even though they came at a cost. I will never trust as easily as I did before that night. It taught me that it is better to be safe than sorry. I'm thankful that it was a learning experience rather than a complete disaster, and I hope my experience can help someone else be more careful. Tinder is not worth your life. I used to think these Tinder horror stories were all made up, blown out of proportion for clicks and likes. I mean, sure, I'd had my fair share of awkward dates and conversations that went nowhere, but nothing truly terrifying. I figure most of those "my date pulled a knife on me" tales were just creative writing exercises gone viral. That was until Liam. I'd been on Tinder for a solid year at that point, post-breakup, and attempting to embrace the whole casual dating thing. I'd met some cool people, some total weirdos, and a few who were surprisingly decent. I was getting good at spotting the red flags early, filtering out the guys who were clearly just looking for hookups or who had profiles riddled with thinly veiled misogyny. I thought I had a pretty good system. Liam's profile was unremarkable. Normal even. A couple of smiling photos, a short bio about enjoying hiking and craft beer. He seemed genuinely nice, and our initial conversations were easy and engaging. We bonded over a shared love of indie music and a mutual disdain for reality TV. He seemed like the kind of guy I could grab a beer with and have a genuinely good time. Safe. We chatted for about a week, before deciding to meet up. He suggested a small brewery near my apartment, which was a plus. I always preferred first dates to be in public places that I was familiar with. It made me feel more in control. I told a friend where I was going and checked in with her when I arrived, just in case. Standard procedure. The date started off great. Liam was just as charming in person as he had been online. He was a good conversationalist. He was funny, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about our jobs, our hobbies, our families. He even asked about my ex, which I usually avoided on first dates, but he seemed genuinely curious and empathetic. Everything felt natural, comfortable. About an hour into the date, he excused himself to go to the restroom. I didn't think anything of it. I scrolled through Instagram for a few minutes, waiting for him to return. But he didn't. 5 minutes turned into 10, then 15. I started to get a little concerned. Maybe he wasn't feeling well? I decided to go check on him. I walked towards the restrooms, but as I got closer, I heard voices coming from the back hallway, near the storage room. One of them was Liam's. The other voice was muffled, but I could tell it was a woman. Curiosity piqued. I cautiously crept closer. I pressed my ear against the wall, trying to make out what they were saying. It was difficult, but I could hear snippets of conversation. Told her I was single. Has no idea. Easy target. My blood ran cold. I realized what was happening. Liam wasn't who he said he was. He was talking about me. I was the easy target. I quietly backed away from the hallway, my mind racing. I needed to get out of there, but I couldn't just leave without knowing what was going on. Was he planning something? Was I in danger? I went back to our table, grabbed my purse, and pretended to check my phone. I texted my friend, telling her to call me in 5 minutes with a fake emergency. Then I waited, my heart pounding in my chest. When my phone rang, I answered it with forced enthusiasm. Hey, what's up? Oh no, seriously? Okay, I'll be right there. I hung up and turned to where Liam had been sitting. He was just walking around the corner. Hey, everything okay? He asked, his voice smooth and concerned. Oh, that was my friend, I said, trying to sound casual. There's an emergency at her apartment. I have to go. Oh, that sucks, he said. Is everything all right? Yeah, I think so, I said, grabbing my jacket. I really have to run. It was nice meeting you, though. I practically ran out of the brewery, not stopping until I was a block away. I didn't look back. I just kept walking, my mind reeling from what I had just overheard. I spent the next few days in a state of paranoia. I changed my locks, installed a security system, and avoided going out alone. I couldn't shake the feeling that Liam was watching me, that he knew where I lived. I did some digging online and found out that Liam had a long history of scamming women on dating apps. He would lure them in with his charm, gain their trust, and then steal their money or personal information. He had been arrested multiple times, but he always managed to get away with it. I contacted the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do without concrete evidence. They took my statement, but they couldn't guarantee my safety. I felt helpless and vulnerable. Then, a few weeks later, I received a message on Tinder from an unknown number. It was a picture of me, taken through my apartment window. The caption read, "I'm always watching." I froze. I knew it was Liam. He had found me. He was taunting me. I deleted my Tinder account and went into hiding. I stayed with friends and family, moving from place to place, terrified that he would find me again. I knew I couldn't live like this forever, but I didn't know what else to do. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. They were there, subtle at first, then increasingly blatant, like neon signs flashing danger. Turn back. But I was young, naive, and desperately lonely. And on Tinder, everyone seems a little off. So, I dismissed them, chalked them up to quirks, and swiped right into a nightmare I'm still trying to process. It started innocently enough. I was fresh out of a messy breakup, wallowing in self-pity and the comforting glow of my phone screen. Tinder seemed like the perfect escape, a curated buffet of potential distractions. I swiped with reckless abandon, not really looking for anything serious, just a connection, a conversation, maybe a fleeting moment of validation. That's when I matched with Liam. His profile was intriguing. A few blurry photos, mostly of him hiking in remote locations or posing next to obscure landmarks. His bio was short and cryptic. Wandering soul. Seeking adventure. It was vague enough to be intriguing, but not so weird that it sent me running for the hills. He had this intense gaze in his pictures that I found oddly captivating. He seemed different from the endless stream of generic guys with their gym selfies and predictable bios. The initial conversations were surprisingly engaging. He didn't ask the usual boring questions about my job or my hobbies. He wanted to know about my dreams, my fears, my deepest insecurities. He had this uncanny ability to make me feel seen, understood, like he was peering into my soul. He was charming, witty, and surprisingly articulate. He'd send me long, thoughtful messages filled with vivid imagery and philosophical musings. I was hooked. I ignored the red flags that were starting to flutter in the back of my mind, like the fact that he never seemed to be available during the day. He always claimed to be busy with work, but he never specified what he actually did, or the fact that he was oddly evasive about his personal life. He never talked about his family, or his friends, or his past. It was like he existed only in the present moment, solely for me. And then there were the late-night phone calls. He'd call me at ungodly hours, sometimes after midnight, and talk for hours about the most bizarre things. Ancient mythology, conspiracy theories, the hidden meanings behind song lyrics. He had this encyclopedic knowledge of obscure topics, and he'd rattle them off in this mesmerizing monotone voice that both fascinated and unnerved me. I should have been freaked out, but I was too caught up in the attention, the feeling of being special, of being the only one who understood him. After a couple of weeks of intense texting and late-night calls, he finally suggested we meet in person. He proposed a hike in a nearby state park. I hesitated. I wasn't usually one for outdoor adventures, but I was so eager to meet him face-to-face that I agreed. Looking back, I should have insisted on a public place, a coffee shop or a bar, somewhere with other people around. But I was so blinded by infatuation that I threw caution to the wind. The day of the hike was overcast and gloomy, which only added to the eerie atmosphere. The park was practically deserted, and the trails were overgrown and poorly marked. I arrived at the trailhead, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. Liam was already there, waiting for me. He looked different in person than he did in his pictures. Taller, thinner, with a gauntness about his face that I hadn't noticed before. He was wearing dark clothing, a long-sleeved shirt and jeans, even though it was relatively warm. He greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. As we started hiking, I tried to make small talk, but he was unusually quiet and withdrawn. He seemed lost in his own thoughts, staring off into the distance with a vacant expression. The trail wound deeper and deeper into the woods, the trees closing in around us, the silence broken only by the rustling of leaves and the occasional caw of a crow. I started to feel uneasy, like we were being watched. After about an hour of hiking, Liam suddenly stopped. He turned to me, his eyes glinting with an intensity that made me recoil. "Do you believe in fate?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. I didn't know how to respond. I mumbled something about not really being sure. He smiled again, that unsettling smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I do," he said. "I believe that everything happens for a reason, that we were meant to meet." He took a step closer to me, and I instinctively backed away. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box. "I want to show you something," he said, his voice hypnotic. I hesitated. I knew I should run, scream, do something to get away from him, but I was paralyzed with fear. He opened the box and held it out to me. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a human tooth. I stared at it in horror, my mind struggling to comprehend what I was seeing. "What is that?" I stammered. "A gift," he said, his eyes gleaming with madness. "A token of my affection." I finally snapped. I screamed and turned to run, but he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. I struggled against him, but he was too strong. He pulled me back towards him, his face contorted with rage. "You can't leave," he hissed. "You're mine now." I kicked and screamed, but no one could hear me. We were completely alone in the middle of the woods. He dragged me deeper into the trees, towards a small clearing I hadn't noticed before. In the center of the clearing was a crude altar made of stones. I realized with growing horror that this wasn't just some random encounter. This was planned. He had lured me here. He had chosen me. He pushed me down onto the altar, and I cried out in terror. He pulled a knife from his pocket, a long, serrated blade that glinted in the dim light. I closed my eyes, bracing for the worst. But then, suddenly, there was a loud crack, and Liam cried out in pain. I opened my eyes and saw a park ranger standing over him, holding a taser. The ranger had apparently heard my screams and had come to investigate. Liam was writhing on the ground, convulsing from the electric shock. The ranger called for backup, and soon the clearing was swarming with police officers. They arrested Liam and took me to the hospital. I was shaken and bruised, but otherwise unharmed. The police investigation revealed that Liam was a suspect in several missing persons cases. He had been using Tinder to lure women into the woods, where he would then, well, I don't want to think about what he would have done. I'm still haunted by the memory of that day. The image of the tooth in the box, the altar in the clearing, Liam's crazed eyes. I still have nightmares. I deleted Tinder, of course. I'll never use a dating app again. The experience has changed me, made me more cautious, more cynical. I'm no longer the naive, lonely girl who swiped right without thinking. I'm a survivor, and I know that looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. But I was too blinded by loneliness to notice. Now I pay attention. I trust my gut, and I never, ever go hiking alone. The worst part about it all is the realization that I was so close to becoming another statistic, another missing person. It could have been me whose picture was plastered on the news, whose family was left to wonder what happened. The thought still makes me shudder. I'm now a shell of my former self, constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if he somehow escaped, if he's still out there, waiting for me. The world feels like a much more dangerous place now, and the internet, once a source of connection and entertainment, is now a source of fear and paranoia. I often wonder if I'll ever truly recover, if I'll ever be able to trust anyone again. The scars, both physical and emotional, are a constant reminder of the day I almost lost everything, and all because I swiped right on a profile that seemed just a little too intriguing. I wish someone had warned me about the echoes, not the kind you hear in a canyon, but the kind that bounce around in your head for years after a brief encounter, amplified by the algorithm and the endless possibilities that Tinder promises but rarely delivers. I downloaded the app during a particularly lonely summer after a messy breakup. Everyone was doing it, right? Swipe, match, chat, maybe a date, maybe something more. I was naive, I guess. I thought I could just dip my toes in, have a little fun, and then move on. I didn't realize how easily it could seep into your life, twisting your expectations and messing with your sense of self. It started innocently enough. The initial rush of getting matches, the validation of strangers, finding you attractive. It was a little ego boost that I desperately needed at the time. I crafted my profile carefully, choosing pictures that showed me at my best, highlighting my interests, trying to project an image of someone interesting and fun. It felt a little like selling myself, but I told myself it was just a game. The conversations were mostly forgettable. Generic greetings, predictable questions, the endless back and forth of trying to find common ground with someone you've only seen a few pictures of. But occasionally, there would be a spark. Someone who seemed genuinely interesting, someone who made me laugh, someone who made me feel like maybe, just maybe, this whole thing wasn't a complete waste of time. That's how I met Liam. His profile was different from the rest. He wasn't posing shirtless in front of a mirror or holding up a fish he'd caught. His pictures were candid, showing him laughing with friends, hiking in the mountains, playing guitar. His bio was witty and self-deprecating, hinting at a vulnerability that I found intriguing. We matched and started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. We talked about music, movies, books, our families, our dreams. He was intelligent, funny, and kind. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, not just hooking up. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet for coffee. The date went well. He was even more charming in person than he was online. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. There was a definite connection, a spark that I hadn't felt in a long time. We made plans to see each other again, and that's when the echoes started. We went on a few more dates, each one as good as the last. I started to let myself believe that maybe this could be something real. Maybe Tinder hadn't completely ruined my ability to connect with people. But then, things started to change. He became less responsive to my messages, his replies shorter and less frequent. He canceled our dates at the last minute, citing work or family emergencies. I tried to be understanding, but a familiar feeling of anxiety started to creep in. Was I doing something wrong? Was I not good enough? One evening, I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw a picture of Liam at a party. He was smiling and laughing, surrounded by friends. The caption said something about having a great time and making memories. It was the same night he had canceled our date, claiming he had to work late. A wave of anger and disappointment washed over me. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I knew that Tinder was full of flaky people who weren't serious about finding a connection. But I had let myself believe that Liam was different. I had let myself get my hopes up. I confronted him about the picture, and he apologized, saying he had forgotten about our date and that he was really busy with work. He promised it wouldn't happen again. I wanted to believe him, but the trust was broken. The echo of his lie reverberated in my mind, making me question everything he had ever told me. We continued to see each other for a few more weeks, but the magic was gone. The conversations felt strained, the laughter forced. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something from me, that he wasn't being honest. One night, after a particularly awkward date, I decided to end things. It was a relief, like taking off a heavy coat. But the echoes didn't stop. In the months that followed, I found myself constantly comparing every new match to Liam. Was he as funny, as intelligent, as kind? I was trapped in a cycle of seeking validation and then being disappointed when the reality didn't live up to my expectations. I started to become cynical, distrustful of everyone I met on the app. I assumed that everyone was lying or hiding something, that no one was genuinely interested in getting to know me. I swiped left more than I swiped right, convinced that I was protecting myself from future heartbreak. But the echoes persisted. I would see Liam's face in a crowd, hear his name mentioned in a conversation, or stumble across a song that reminded me of him. Each time, the pain would resurface, a reminder of the connection I thought we had and the disappointment of its demise. I started to realize that Tinder had changed me. It had made me more guarded, more skeptical, more afraid of getting hurt. It had created a constant sense of comparison, a feeling that I was always being judged and evaluated. It had amplified my insecurities and made me question my worth. I deleted the app, hoping to silence the echoes, but they were already ingrained in my mind, a permanent soundtrack to my dating life. I tried to move on, to forget about Liam and Tinder, but it was like trying to erase a memory that was constantly being replayed. It took me a long time to understand that the problem wasn't Liam or Tinder, it was me. I had allowed the app to define my self-worth, to dictate my expectations, to control my emotions. I had given it too much power. I started to focus on myself, on my own happiness and well-being. I spent time with friends and family, pursued my hobbies, and volunteered in my community. I stopped seeking validation from others and started to appreciate myself for who I was. Slowly, the echoes started to fade. They didn't disappear completely, but they became quieter, less intrusive. I realized that I could still have meaningful connections with people, even if they weren't perfect or long-lasting. I'm not saying that Tinder is evil or that no one can find love on it. I know people who have had positive experiences with the app, who have met their partners and built lasting relationships. But I also know that it can be a dangerous place, a breeding ground for disappointment, insecurity, and heartbreak. If I could go back, I would tell myself to be more cautious, to not let the app define my self-worth, to not get my hopes up too high. I would tell myself to trust my instincts, to be honest about my needs, and to walk away from anyone who doesn't treat me with respect. Most importantly, I would tell myself that I am worthy of love and happiness, regardless of what happens on a dating app. The echoes may linger, but they don't have to define me. I can choose to create my own soundtrack, one filled with hope, resilience, and self-love. The biggest thing I wish someone had warned me about Tinder is that you should be careful about the people you meet. Tinder is just an app, and it shouldn't be that important. Okay, so, let me preface this by saying I'm not usually one to believe in, anything weird. Ghosts, aliens, conspiracy theories. I've always been a pretty staunch skeptic. But what happened to me last year, after I matched with this girl on Tinder, has seriously shaken my whole worldview. I'm still trying to make sense of it, and honestly, I'm sharing it now because keeping it bottled up is starting to drive me insane. It all started like any other Tinder success story, I guess. I'd been single for a while, working a dead-end job, and just generally feeling like I was stuck in a rut. Swiping felt like the easiest way to inject some kind of novelty into my life, even if it was just superficial. I wasn't looking for anything serious, maybe just a few dates, a little conversation. Then I saw her profile. Her name was Clara, and her pictures were striking. She had this intense, almost haunting look in her eyes, like she knew something you didn't. Long, dark hair, pale skin, and a style that was kind of vintage, like she'd stepped out of a black and white movie. Her bio was short and cryptic. Lost in time, looking for a connection. It was cheesy, sure, but it caught my attention. I swiped right. We matched instantly. Her messages were just as enigmatic as her profile. She didn't ask the usual getting-to-know-you questions. Instead, she'd send me these strange, poetic messages about dreams, memories, and the fleeting nature of time. It was like talking to someone from a different era. I know it sounds cliché, but there was something undeniably captivating about her. I was drawn to the mystery, the sense that there was something more to her than met the eye. After a few days of this, she suggested we meet up. She picked a place I'd never heard of, an old bookstore tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city. It was called the Obsidian Quill, and she said it was her favorite place in the world. I Googled it, but nothing came up. No website, no reviews, no mention of it anywhere. It was like the place didn't exist. That should have been a red flag, right? But curiosity got the better of me. I decided to go. Finding the bookstore was an adventure in itself. It was hidden down a narrow alleyway, the entrance barely visible in the dim light. The building looked ancient, with crumbling brick walls and boarded-up windows. A single, flickering gas lamp illuminated a hand-painted sign above the door. The Obsidian Quill. Stepping inside was like stepping into another world. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and dust. The shelves were crammed with books of all shapes and sizes, reaching all the way to the high, vaulted ceiling. The only light came from a few antique lamps scattered around the room, casting long, dancing shadows. It was eerily quiet, almost unsettlingly so. Clara was standing near the back, browsing through a shelf of ancient-looking tomes. She looked even more striking in person. As I approached, she turned and smiled, a slow, captivating smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "I'm so glad you came," she said, her voice soft and melodic. We spent the next few hours lost in the bookstore. She showed me her favorite books, told me stories about their authors, and shared her thoughts on life, death, and everything in between. It was the most engaging conversation I'd had in years. She was intelligent, witty, and incredibly perceptive. I felt like she understood me in a way that no one ever had before. But there were also moments that felt off. She'd say things that didn't quite make sense, references to events or people that I couldn't place. She'd talk about the past as if she'd lived through it herself, describing historical events with vivid detail. And every now and then, I'd catch her staring at me with a strange, almost mournful expression, like she was seeing something I couldn't see. As the evening wore on, I started to feel increasingly disoriented. The bookstore seemed to shift and change around me, the shadows growing longer and darker. The air grew colder, and I felt a strange pressure in my head. I told myself it was just the late hour, the lack of sleep, the overwhelming atmosphere of the place. Clara suggested we leave. As we walked out of the bookstore, I noticed something even stranger. The alleyway was different. The buildings looked older, the streetlights were gas lamps, and the air smelled of coal smoke. It was like we'd stepped back in time. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But as we walked further, the changes became more pronounced. The cars were gone, replaced by horse-drawn carriages. The people were dressed in old-fashioned clothes. It was like I was walking through a historical movie set. I turned to Clara, my heart pounding in my chest. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What is this place?" She just smiled, that same enigmatic smile she'd given me in the bookstore. "Don't you see," she said, "time is fluid. It's not a straight line. We can move through it, visit different moments, experience different realities." "Ich stelle her, dumbfundel." "That's impossible," I said. "That's not how time works." "Isn't it?" she replied. "Or is that just what you've been told?" She led me to a nearby park, a place I recognized from my own time. But even the park was different. The trees were older, the statues were different, and there was a sense of Victorian-era elegance that was completely absent in the present day. We sat on a bench, and Clara started to tell me her story. She said she was born in the late 1800s and had lived through a series of historical events. She claimed she had discovered a way to manipulate time, to move through different eras at will. She said she was searching for someone to share her journey with, someone who understood the true nature of reality. I listened to her story with a mixture of fascination and disbelief. It sounded insane, completely impossible. But at the same time, there was something about her that made me want to believe her. The way she spoke, the conviction in her voice, the knowledge in her eyes. It was all too real to dismiss as simple delusion. As she spoke, I started to remember things, memories that weren't mine. I saw images of horse-drawn carriages, gaslit streets, and grand Victorian mansions. I felt a strange sense of longing for a time I'd never known. It was like Clara was unlocking something deep within my subconscious, revealing a hidden part of myself that I never knew existed. The night went on, and we walked through the streets, exploring this strange, altered version of my city. Clara showed me hidden places, secret gardens, and forgotten landmarks. She told me stories about the people who had lived there, their hopes, their dreams, their tragedies. By the time the sun began to rise, I was completely exhausted, both physically and mentally. I was still skeptical, still struggling to reconcile what I was seeing with my rational mind. But I couldn't deny the fact that something extraordinary was happening. Clara took me back to the alleyway where the bookstore was located. As we approached, I saw that the alleyway had changed again. It looked more like the alleyway I remembered, but there were still subtle differences, a lingering sense of the past. "It's time for you to go back," she said, her voice filled with sadness. "I can't stay here. This time doesn't belong to me." I wanted to argue, to stay with her, to learn more about her world. But I knew she was right. I didn't belong there. She kissed me, a soft, lingering kiss that tasted of dust and old paper. Then she turned and walked back into the alleyway, disappearing into the shadows. I stood there for a long time, watching the alleyway, hoping she would come back. But she didn't. Finally, I turned and walked away, back into the present. When I got home, I was a mess. I tried to tell my friends what had happened, but they just laughed and said I'd had a wild dream. I tried to find the obsidian quill again, but it was gone. The alleyway was just an empty space between two buildings. I started to question my sanity. Had it all been a dream? Had I imagined the whole thing? But then I looked in the mirror, and I saw something that made me stop questioning. There on my neck, just below my ear, was a small, faded birthmark, a birthmark I'd never seen before. It was shaped like an obsidian quill. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know if Clara was a time traveler, a ghost, or just a figment of my imagination. But I know that something extraordinary happened, something that changed my life forever. I still think about her, about Clara, about the obsidian quill, about the night we spent walking through a forgotten time. I don't know if I'll ever see her again, but I hope that one day I'll find my way back to that bookstore, back to her, back to the night when time stood still. And you know what's crazy? I logged back onto Tinder a few weeks ago, just out of curiosity. And guess who popped up? Clara. Same pictures, same bio. I swiped right. I'm still waiting for a match. I don't know what I'll do if we match again. I really don't. But I have to know. I have to find out what really happened. I have to know if I'm completely insane, or if there's something more out there than we can possibly imagine. This has opened my eyes to some type of way to see life. Okay, so Tinder. I swear, it's like the Wild West of dating apps, right? You never really know what you're gonna get. You could swipe right on the love of your life. Or you could end up on a date with someone who unironically wears a fedora. Or, something way worse. This is a story about that way worse scenario. I was in my early 20s, fresh out of a bad breakup, and convinced that the only way to get over someone was to throw myself headfirst into the dating pool. Bad idea, I know, but young and dumb, right? Tinder seemed like the easiest option. Swipe, match, chat, meetup. Rinse and repeat until you find someone tolerable. I wasn't really looking for anything serious, just some fun, some distraction, maybe a rebound. My profile was pretty basic. A couple of decent pictures, a short bio about liking hiking and dogs, and a general vibe of I'm cool and easygoing. I probably swiped right on way too many people. But hey, options, right? Anyway, I matched with this guy named Mark. His profile was intriguing. He had a few pictures of himself doing outdoorsy stuff. Hiking, rock climbing, kayaking. He was definitely attractive, in that rugged, outdoorsy kind of way. His bio was short and sweet. Adventure seeker. Let's explore. Seemed harmless enough. We started chatting, and he seemed pretty normal. He asked about my hobbies, my job, my favorite movies. He was a good conversationalist, and we had a few things in common. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, which was a nice change from the usual Tinder small talk. After a few days of chatting, he suggested we meet up for a hike. I was a little hesitant. Meeting someone from Tinder in the middle of the woods seemed like a recipe for disaster, but he seemed so enthusiastic, and I was bored and looking for something to do. Plus, I figured, what could go wrong? It's a public place, right? I told a few friends about my plans, sent them his picture and profile, and shared my location with them. You know, the usual safety precautions. I met him at the trailhead, and he was even more attractive in person. He had this intense gaze and a charming smile. I immediately felt a little flutter of excitement. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. The hike started out great. The weather was perfect, the scenery was beautiful, and Mark was surprisingly engaging. He told stories about his travels, his adventures, and his passion for the outdoors. He was knowledgeable about the local flora and fauna, pointing out different plants and animals along the way. I was actually enjoying myself. But then, as we got further into the woods, things started to shift. He started asking more personal questions, questions that made me a little uncomfortable. He asked about my past relationships, my family, my deepest fears. It felt like he was trying to dig too deep, too fast. I tried to deflect, to change the subject, but he was persistent. He kept pressing, kept pushing, until I felt like I was trapped. I started to get a bad feeling, a sense of unease that crept under my skin. He wasn't smiling anymore, and his eyes had lost their charm. The trail became steeper and more rugged. We were completely alone, surrounded by trees, with no one else in sight. The air felt heavy, and the silence was deafening. I started to regret my decision to come on this hike. He stopped walking and turned to face me. His expression was serious, almost predatory. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. "You know," he said, his voice low and gravelly, "I've been watching you for a while." My blood ran cold. I didn't know what to say, what to do. I just stared at him, frozen with fear. "I saw you on Tinder," he continued, "and I knew I had to meet you. You're exactly what I've been looking for." I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like lead. He reached out and touched my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. I flinched, trying to pull away, but he held on tight. "Don't be afraid," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "I'm not going to hurt you." But I didn't believe him. I could see the darkness in his eyes, the twisted look on his face. I knew I was in danger. I finally managed to find my voice. "Let go of me," I said, my voice trembling. He ignored me. He pulled me closer, his face inches from mine. I could smell his breath, stale and unpleasant. "You're going to come with me," he said. "We're going to go somewhere private, where we can be alone." I struggled, kicking and screaming, but he was too strong. He overpowered me, dragging me deeper into the woods. I knew I had to do something, anything, to escape. I remembered the self-defense keychain I had bought a few weeks earlier. I had it in my pocket, just in case. I reached for it, my fingers fumbling with the metal. As he pulled me further, I finally managed to get the keychain in my hand. As he grabbed my arm, I jabbed the keys into his eye. He screamed and released me. I stumbled backward, but did not stop running. I didn't look back, didn't stop until I reached the trailhead. I called the police. After telling them my story, they took me to the hospital. The police found him a few hours later, not far from where I had escaped. He was arrested and charged with kidnapping and assault. It turned out he had a history of violence and had been stalking other women he had met on dating apps. That experience changed me. It shook me to my core. I realized how vulnerable I was, how easily I could have become a victim. It taught me to be more cautious, more aware of the dangers that lurk in the shadows. It taught me to trust my instincts, to listen to that little voice inside my head that tells me when something is wrong. I still use dating apps, but I'm much more careful now. I do my research, I video chat before meeting in person, and I always meet in public places. I never go anywhere alone with someone I don't know well. That experience taught me to always be aware of my surroundings, to be prepared for anything, and to trust my gut. That little jabbing self-defense keychain I had bought, that thing saved my life. It taught me the importance of self-defense, because you never know when you might need it. I will never leave the house without it. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but the fact that Liam only had one blurry picture on his Tinder profile should have been a massive red flag. It was a photo of him standing in front of some graffiti art, his face mostly obscured by the shadow of a baseball cap. His bio was equally vague. Here for a good time, adventurous and always up for anything. It wasn't exactly the profile of a serial killer, but it wasn't exactly reassuring either. I was in a weird place, freshly out of a long-term relationship, nursing a bruised ego, and desperately trying to convince myself that I was ready to get back out there. Tinder seemed like the easiest way to dip my toes back into the dating pool, even though the whole thing felt shallow and transactional. I swiped right on Liam mostly because I was bored and his profile was just intriguing enough to pique my curiosity. Plus, he seemed different from the usual parade of gym selfies and generic pickup lines. We matched almost immediately, and he messaged me within minutes. His messages were surprisingly articulate and engaging. He asked about my interests, my favorite books, my travel dreams. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, which was a refreshing change from the usual "wanna hook up" overtures. We chatted for a couple of days, and I found myself increasingly drawn to his mysterious and slightly brooding persona. He suggested meeting for coffee, and I, against my better judgment, agreed. We picked a small, independent cafe in a part of town I wasn't super familiar with. As I got ready that evening, I felt a nervous flutter in my stomach. Was this a good idea? Probably not. But I was tired of being cautious and sensible. I wanted to feel something, even if it was just a fleeting spark of attraction. When I arrived at the cafe, Liam was already there, sitting at a table in the corner. He looked different in person than he did in his blurry photo. He was taller than I expected, with dark, piercing eyes and a disarming smile. He was wearing a worn leather jacket and faded jeans, and he had this effortlessly cool vibe about him that was hard to resist. The coffee date went surprisingly well. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He was intelligent, witty, and surprisingly empathetic. He listened attentively when I talked about my breakup, and he offered insightful observations without being judgmental. He also had a dark sense of humor that resonated with me. I found myself laughing more than I had in months. As the evening drew to a close, Liam suggested going for a walk. I hesitated. It was getting late, and I didn't know him that well, but he gave me that disarming smile and said, "Come on, don't be boring. Let's go explore." I caved. I told myself it was just a walk, that I could handle it. We walked through the dimly lit streets of the neighborhood, talking and laughing. Liam seemed to know the area well, pointing out hidden alleyways and quirky shops I never would have noticed on my own. He had a way of making the mundane feel exciting and adventurous. As we walked deeper into the neighborhood, the streets became quieter and more deserted. I started to feel a prickle of unease. Where were we going? I asked Liam, and he just smiled and said, "Trust me, I want to show you something." He led me down a narrow alleyway, the walls closing in around us. The air was thick with the smell of garbage and damp concrete. I could hear the faint sound of dripping water. I felt a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. I should have turned back. At the end of the alleyway, there was a heavy metal door. Liam pulled out a set of keys and unlocked the door, pushing it open with a loud creak. He gestured for me to enter. "After you," he said, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. I hesitated. I didn't like this. I didn't like any of this. "Liam, I don't think this is a good idea," I said, my voice trembling slightly. He laughed, a low, unsettling sound. "Come on, don't be scared. It's just a little adventure." He reached out and took my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Trust me," he repeated. I looked into his eyes, and for the first time, I saw something unsettling there. Something cold and calculating. Something that made my blood run cold. I knew, in that instant, that I had made a terrible mistake. I tried to pull my hand away, but he wouldn't let go. He pulled me through the door and into the darkness. The door slammed shut behind us, the sound echoing in the enclosed space. I was plunged into total darkness. I couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything except my own ragged breathing. I felt a surge of panic rising in my chest. "Liam," I whispered, my voice barely audible. There was no response. I fumbled for my phone in my purse, my fingers shaking uncontrollably. I managed to turn on the flashlight and shine it around the room. It was a small, windowless space, with bare concrete walls and a dirt floor. There was a single wooden chair in the corner, I was trapped. Liam, I shouted, my voice echoing in confined space. Let me out. I heard a faint chuckle from the darkness. Patience, Liam said, his voice sounding distorted and distant. The fun is just beginning. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. What was happening? Who was this person? I tried the door, but it was locked. I pounded on it with my fists, screaming for help. But no one could hear me. I was alone, trapped in a dark, unknown place with a man I barely knew. Hours passed. I don't know how many. I sat on the chair, shivering in the cold, trying to make sense of what was happening. I replayed the events of the evening in my mind, searching for clues, for warning signs I had missed. Liam didn't come back. I didn't hear from him. The darkness was absolute, the silence deafening. I started to lose hope. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I heard a noise. A faint scratching sound coming from the walls. It was similar to the sound I had heard in my old apartment, but amplified, more insistent. The scratching grew louder, closer. I shone my flashlight on the wall, and I saw something that made my heart stop. There were cracks in the concrete, spiderwebbing across the surface. And from within the cracks, something was emerging. Something dark and twisted. It was a hand. A skeletal hand, with long, bony fingers. It reached out from the wall, groping blindly in the air. I screamed. More hands appeared, emerging from the cracks in the wall. They were followed by faces. Gaunt, decaying faces, with empty eye sockets and gaping mouths. They were reaching for me. I scrambled to my feet, knocking over the chair. I backed away from the wall, my heart pounding in my chest. The creatures were all around me now, their skeletal bodies pressing against the walls. They were moaning and groaning, their voices a chorus of the damned. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I was going to die. Just then, the door creaked open. Liam stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the light. He was smiling, a wide, manic grin that stretched across his face. "Enjoying the adventure?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I stared at him, my mind reeling. He was responsible for this. He had brought me here. He had unleashed these creatures. Why? I managed to choke out. "Why are you doing this?" Liam laughed. "Because it's fun," he said. "Because I like to watch people suffer. And because," he added, his voice dropping to a whisper, "you deserved it." He stepped aside, allowing the creatures to swarm me. I screamed, but my voice was drowned out by their moans and groans. They descended upon me, their skeletal hands tearing at my clothes, their decaying faces pressing against my skin. I felt a searing pain as they ripped and clawed at my flesh. I closed my eyes and waited for the end, but it never came. Instead, I woke up. I was lying in my bed, my body drenched in sweat. My heart was pounding, my breathing ragged. It was just a dream, but it felt so real. I got out of bed and stumbled to the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide with fear. I was alive, but I would never be the same. I deleted Tinder that day. I never went on another online date. I couldn't. The memory of that dream, of Liam's smiling face and the skeletal creatures in the darkness, was too vivid, too terrifying. I still don't know what Liam was. A psychopath, a demon, or just a figment of my imagination. But I do know one thing. I learned a valuable lesson that night. A lesson about the dangers of trusting strangers, about the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly normal people. I learned that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we invite into our lives. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but looking back, I was lucky to get out of that situation with my life. Now, I am more careful and trust my gut.